Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a comparison between the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4 and its predecessor, the Z Fold 3. Now, these are both excellent phones, and you really can't go wrong with either one, especially if what you desire is a folding device. The Z Fold 3 was already incredibly mature with its 120 Hz refresh rate on the interior 7.6-inch as well as external 6.2-inch display, great cameras, decent but not great battery life with that 4400 milliamp hour battery, very good processor, 12 gigs of RAM, wide array of storage options, so a lot to like here, and I would say this really solidified the folding phone market, not just as being viable, but profitable and mainstream. Where Gen 1 and 2 were still in experimental phases. Now, I've already traded in my Z Fold 2 for the Z Fold 4. After all, tough to look past that $1,000. Now the question becomes, will the Z Fold 3 get traded in against my fiance's Z Fold 4? Because I did purchase one for her as well. And I think that it probably will, because as much as I like this phone, it's overkill as a backup, but I digress. How did they improve here with the Z Fold 4? Now, generally, I would have, a series of videos, but if you follow my channel, you know I've been dealing with, unfortunately, a lot of crap as of late. Not my own doing, but, health problems that we all gotta just, get through and do what we have to in life. And I'm just glad to be back, even if I'm in a lot of pain, filming and sharing content with all of you again. And, I wouldn't be doing this for over a decade if it wasn't for my audience. So don't forget that. I more than appreciate all of you that have stuck with me over the years, and even those of you, of course, that are brand new here in this video. So with that out of the way, the Fold 4 has polish, and a lot of people have been saying, oh, it's just about polish. It's not just about polish, because even though the device wasn't reimagined, I think changing the aspect ratio and making both the internal display wider as well as the front display wider is a game changer. And while it's subtle, it's not just polish. Now, if all they had done was give us new cameras, of course, a new processor, larger internal storage capacity, which they did, and improvements in software like the taskbar that we now have permanently that allows multitasking to be really, I would say, pretty seamless, then I would dare to say this is just polish. But because it physically changes the experience, and as someone in the fourth generation of folding, so to speak, I can tell you it is a game-changing design change. Similarly to what we went through with Gen 1 to 2. Gen 1, the front display was better than nothing. Gen 2, it felt like a front display. Gen 3, we got a higher refresh rate so that we had 120 matching, right? Uniformity matters. You don't want to literally feel like you have two different devices where the front display, while serviceable, makes it feel sluggish compared to the internal simply because it doesn't have a higher refresh rate. Well, here, forget about those things. This is about usability, just like Gen 1 to 2. So I'm going to say it's beyond polish. It's not because, I'm a fan. It's because it's obvious if you've used every gen. So multitasking with the wider interior display, much better. That's why I feel like we also have a tailored experience now to multitasking. I mean, yes, before it was easy, it was never this easy. And I think all of the critique that people had about using a device like this for split screen as opposed to something like the Microsoft Surface Duo, Samsung heard that and said, we already are making a better phone than what they've made, so let's just make it a little bit wider, and then what is anyone going to have to say? But the real advantage, the killer advantage, is the front display. I can say that as, again, someone who's used every generation, and it's been better than nothing, and it's improved each generation, but now it's wide enough that if I didn't want to open the phone ever for the interior, larger tablet experience, I could live on this one. And that's because we're finally to a size that is, I think it's comparable. It draws direct parity with a traditional candy bar style phone like, well, all of the flagship top tier crap. And I call it crap because, you know, look, everyone's entitled. If you prefer that, that's fine, but it's just old, recycled crap, for lack of a better way of putting it, you know, over and over again. Now, if I'm composing an email, if I'm sending a text, chatting, browsing the web, I don't feel like I have to go to the internal display. Huge difference. So software is better. The aspect ratio is a killer change, in my opinion. We finally have a decent case from Samsung. Expensive, but it actually is serviceable. Now, I wish it could accommodate a pen as well as give us a kickstand. It's either or, but, you know, case in point, my fiance prefers the pen. I prefer the kickstand, but I'm going to get rid of the front cover, as many of you already know, if you didn't see that coming, just like I did with this generation, and I'm probably going to use either the VRS design front case or the Spigen ThinFit P. It looks like it'll be the Spigen. Unfortunately, Spigen won't put a kickstand on that case. If they did, it would be perfect. Spigen, come on, let's go. Especially with how expensive these cases are. I mean, Samsung's ripping everyone off with this one. I mean, it was free with the pre-order, but then you look at third-party cases, and Samsung doesn't seem like such a ripoff because Spigen is also a ripoff. They all are. Even the Chinese no-name companies are now charging $50, $60, and $70 for plastic that we can put on these $2,000 phones. But I digress. So what else just is superior? The cameras. We have optical zoom now, better quality overall. Is it miles apart from the Fold 3? No. But as someone who enjoys photography, covers cameras, I've been doing that for a decade. It's evolved quite a bit, the way I look at them, use them, and appreciate them. It's great to have better overall quality, especially ahead of this mega trip that I'm about to go on. You want to have the best possible cameras you can in your pocket. And that's not to say the Fold 3 cameras were bad. I'm not in love with what Samsung continues to do, where they give us, you know, basically the camera modules from the current Galaxy S line flagship. It's not a bad thing, but remember, in Gen 1, the kitchen sink was thrown into these devices. You got the best of everything. Best processor, largest amount of RAM, best camera modules. The idea was to trickle down this Swiss Army knife. Now, ever since it became more about refining the profitability side of things, trying to make it more affordable, which hasn't really happened, right? But scaling it properly, that's where they started cutting corners. I'd like to see a micro SD card slot come back, but the fact that I have 1 terabyte of storage in here, that's another killer feature because, well, I use a lot of Insta360 cameras. Having them with a device like this is a major, you know, with a terabyte is a major advantage. The phone did get lighter. A little bit thinner. The hinge has supposedly been slightly tweaked. What I can tell you is that opening and closing the Fold 3, there was often a crunchy noise. I'm sure Fold owners know what I'm talking about. Here I haven't experienced that, so I think it's a good thing. You know, it always kind of made me feel like something might be awry, but alas, it seems that everything was intact except for the Wi-Fi on the previous model, which Samsung tried to screw me about. You've probably seen those videos. If you haven't, you can go watch it. It got resolved. I got the new phone. Now the new phone's going to go back to Samsung. So I guess they win after all, right? They sold the Fold 4, and yeah, $1,000 discount, but they're going to sell this thing. But overall, what else has been tweaked? Yes, we have a new processor, the latest Snapdragon Gen 8, but you know, the real advantage there isn't that it's night and day in performance. It's that battery life is better here using the same 4,400 milliamp hour battery. That's a big, big deal because as soon as I saw the spec sheet for this phone and that we had the same size battery, that was a concern. Battery life here was the worst, really, of the Fold line in days or years past. Here, the processor offset that. Same amount of RAM, again, more internal storage, better overall performance, essentially the latest and greatest of everything. The under-display camera is supposed to be less noticeable, and I think it is slightly less noticeable, but I wouldn't get caught up in that. I'm curious if any of you are going to be able to tell. Take a look. See if you can see it. What do you spy with your little or fairly large eye? Then it comes to the good old Z Fold 4. Tell me I'm curious what the results are, what you do or do not see. And even though I've complimented the software on the newer Fold 4, remember, it's not that big of a difference. It's just, I would call that the polish, as I've said. So again, to recap, we now have the most important thing, a wider aspect ratio or display. It's slightly shorter also, if you didn't notice. And really that just makes for better multitasking on the internal display and better actual operation, to me, the killer app on the front display. I mean, this has just, as I've said, refined, changed, reimagined for me the usability of this display. And I use the front display a ton. So to get it to be now complete, a finished product, in my opinion, that's major. Again, improved cameras, the big win for me. We now have optical zoom, megapixel count, less important. And of course, on top of all of that, slightly better battery performance. I wish we had faster charging. We don't. 25 watts is still where it's at. Qi charging, pretty much the same. These are things like the micro SD card slot I'd like to see Samsung address. It's just an obvious thing, but the Z Fold 4 has a lot going for it. Again, should you upgrade from the Fold 3? I mean, it's not economically sound, I can tell you that, for the changes that we've gotten, unless, like me, you do what I do. Obviously, then, well, Samsung may have given you one for free. I'm not that lucky yet. We'll get there, kids. I have confidence. Eventually, somewhere over the rainbow. But, from an economic standpoint, the differences aren't going to be enough for, I think, a lot of people out there. And that's a good choice. I mean, if you can wait a generation, the Fold 5, I'm sure, is going to blow us all away. I think they will incorporate the pen, and just getting lighter and, having a more durable hinge. Those are good things, but we're moving in the right direction that I think they're going to find a way, especially with the phone getting wider. Think about that for a minute. Getting more room in there, even though it's getting slimmer and lighter. And that's a big advantage too, but not big enough for me to ever tell someone to dump the Fold 3. So I still think the Fold 3 is the next best folding phone on the market. And look, some people might prefer the more narrow build, but I think the majority between the multitasking and front display are going to love this thing. And if it's your first folding phone, save the money, I would say, and get the Fold 3, because you might be able to get it for literally half the price. And this is not worth an extra $1,000. Okay, that should be very clear by now. So kudos, as I often say, to manufacturers that do the right thing. Samsung has made a phenomenal phone here, the best of everything. I'd like to see them really make it the best of everything rather than just the best of everything folding phone. From a case perspective, I already said it, this is the best case Samsung's ever made for their Fold line. Just please figure out a way to incorporate the pen and it'll be a superstar, but it's low profile. I like the soft touch finish. It's the highest quality of any case I've seen so far. Do I prefer a carbon fiber thin fit like this? Yes, but this is pretty damn close, so I'm happy with it. And the kickstand here, I think, is a little bit more dynamic, although it does wobble, as you may have seen when it's upright. So that's an issue. But what really bothers me is just relying on the adhesive and the fact that this never really stays. And of course, most importantly, I want a place to put my pen. But that rounds things out. Both of these are great phones. Go with the Fold 4 if you can. If you're considering upgrading, I don't think it's worth the additional money. But if, like me, any of the things I mentioned about the usability of this front display and multitasking improving, and then, of course, the cameras being better, that's enough to get me on board. It may be enough to get you on board too. And clearly, if you are a Fold user every generation, then I'm not going to say money is no object, but it's certainly not preventing you from upgrading. So you likely will. And I think you will be very happy. As I said, my fiance is in love with her phone, and she's watched me have every generation, and she was not sure if she would really fall in love with such a large phone compared to her traditional Note series. But now with the pen, now with the more robust build quality, and even a color scheme that we both really like, I know that she's in love with it. As an architect, the ability to review plans on the internal display, mark things up, I mean, it's a no-brainer. And I always knew she would want it for that reason, which is why I got it for her. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. I have no regrets about trading in my Fold 2 and now the Fold 3. I just won't have a backup, but before I lose my train of thought again, any questions or comments, please feel free to post them at that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe and please stay safe. Later.